coming up in this episode.
So I'm saying, even with today, unless it's on the dark web, you wouldn't see this sort of stuff, yeah? Now, I thought I was a hard geezer. I've come from the streets, I've been stabbed, I've been jumped, I've been battered, I've got stitches, I've been bricked in their head and barred in their head and all that stuff, yeah? But even I wasn't ready for what I saw. I said to myself, what kind of human being, what kind of evil, depraved human being can do that to another human being? It's etched inside my soul, what I saw and what I heard over that period of time. So that's when I decided that I'm going to stay in Bosnia and I'm going to join the Mujahideen and I'm going to fight for these people.
In this episode, we go through the story of Shahid Butt, a man who was dubbed as one of the founding fathers of British jihad. He's one of the earliest Muslims from Britain who responded to the war in Bosnia. He also fought later in other regions, including Afghanistan. This episode and the next will take you on a journey of the Bosnian War through the eyes of people I'm about to speak to. I must say, Shahid Butt's story goes way beyond Bosnia, and I've included some of his stories inside of this episode. He's someone I can just sit with for weeks and weeks and weeks listening to his wisdom and all of the stories that he's encountered in his life. Perhaps I could do a whole series on him, who knows, like many of my other guests. Anyways, I present to you episode 5. Let's begin. Today, I'm with someone very interesting who I've wanted to interview for quite a few months now, and we finally managed to arrange it. And I'm with none other than Shahid Butt, who is known in the media as the father of jihad, or modern day jihad, for the Western world. Now, Shahid Butt has a very interesting story, very, very interesting story. I think his life story can be a whole series in and of itself. Obviously, today the focus will be about Bosnia. So maybe I'll ask him to introduce himself and tell us about the world and the situation that he grew up in that eventually led him into the 90s.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salam ala Sayyidina Mursaleen amma ba'd. My name, as you said, Shahid Butt. I'm from Birmingham. I was born in Pakistan, in Lahore, but I came to the UK when I was very young, about 6 months or a year old. I'm not too sure. I can't remember. I need to ask my mum and dad. Well, my dad actually. My mum's passed away. So, inshallah, I'm going to take you on a journey. It's going to be a very interesting journey. So you will need to bear with me because there's a point to what I'm talking about. And, sometimes I may slightly digress, but the reason to digress is to give a bit of context so that you can understand where I'm coming from. To start this off, it's very important to understand where I came from and what environment that I grew up in the UK, in Birmingham. So I grew up as a young boy in the 1970s. And I can actually pinpoint this down to the actual, very precisely. And the reason why I can do that, because this is not the first time that I'm talking about my story. So I've had many opportunities to think about it and to, refine it into, as succinct a way as I can. But it's very hard to talk about 60 years of my life in, half an hour or an hour. So now I want you all to picture yourselves as an 11-year-old schoolboy in his first month or so of secondary school, wearing his blazer and his shirt and his tie, that blazer and shirt that he went out with his mum, and he was really excited to buy his first blazer. And, his mum ironed his shirt for him. He's got his school tie on, didn't know how to tie a tie. And then, my dad helped me, and then I put my tie on. So, I'm that new kid, just started secondary school, all jolly. And, it's 1971, and I'm walking to school, and as I'm halfway to school, suddenly I just feel like a big thud in the back of my head, and I sort of fall to the ground, and then the next thing you know, I'm just being kicked and punched and ragdolled around, and as this was happening, I'm being told you fucking packy, go back to where you come from, you packy bastard, blah blah blah, and all this sort of stuff. So what happened was that a gang of adult, not kids, adult National Front skinheads had basically jumped me, beat the shit out of me, knocked me out and left me on the side of the road unconscious. So obviously, eventually when I came to, I open my eyes and I'm all bloody and bruised, and I'm in a state of shock. And I look up and I see this guy standing in front of me, and he put his hand out to me, and he goes, take my hand, and he helped me up, and he said to me, son, welcome to the real world. Yeah. And then he just sort of walked off. I did find out who that was later on. Now, you've got to understand that, because when you're going to hear the rest of the story, a lot of people are going to say, so why did you get into this? Why did you become like that? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? You need to understand that this is how I came into this world at 11 years old. This was my rude awakening. This was my from a boy to a man kind of scenario. I didn't become a man, but it was the first part of that, of my story. And that was when the fight or flight scenario came in as well. And Alhamdulillah, I didn't choose the flight, I chose the fight, because that solidified in me this rebel, this rebellious, this angry, this vicious, this, angry young boy, who now had a chip on his shoulder, that who do they think they are to beat me up? The problem was that because I was a boy, 11 years old, I didn't know how to fight. Because the only thing that came into my mind was to fight. So I started to learn martial arts at the age of 11, at a very young age. Now you got to understand again, it wasn't like now where there's an MMA class in every corner. I had to go to the local library, take a book out on karate, look at the pictures in my house, black and white pictures of some Japanese guy, in the thing, how to make a fist, how to punch. So I practiced punching the walls and stuff like that, till eventually I saved a bit of money to go to a club, and but that's how that was my upbringing. And because of all of that, and again, there's so much detail that I can give you about growing up. Imagine you're a 13-year-old kid, and at school time, a coach pulls up outside your school, grown men, skinheads, National Front, racist men come out, baseball bats, crash helmets on, and they're standing on one side of the road, and all of you school kids are standing on the other side of the road. You kids, you people who are listening to this, who have got children, imagine that happened in your kids' secondary school today. Imagine if you're younger, imagine if it happened when you were at secondary school. That was the reality of what I grew up with. The question, where's the police? They didn't exist. Nobody cared, because it was a free-for-all. The racists ruled the streets. Nobody even knew about, fighting back. We were the ones, we formed a gang called the Lynx in 1980, and we fought back against the skinheads and the National Front. So this is the backdrop of the life that I came from. So that baptism of fire was what forged me into what I became later on. For me, the only thing that I knew was these fists. Because I got kicked out of school. I have no formal education. I never sat any GCSEs or O levels or whatever. I've got no college. I've got no university degree. I'm what you call, I'm uneducated in the sense of I have no physical paperwork to say that I'm educated. I've just learned myself off the streets and what I've learned in a lived life experience. So this was the baptism of fire that I came from, and that then pushed me in a certain direction, in a direction where, I was very aggressive. I was very, my first port of call was to punch. So you punch first and you ask questions later. That was it. Because I never learned how to communicate. I didn't know. I had a lack of belonging. I didn't know. In school time I'm English. I go home I'm Pakistani, and then I go to the masjid and I'm a Muslim. I was fighting all these different identities, and on top of that, you got all these white people saying to me, "You're a fucking Paki. Go back to where you come from." I'm confused. So I had an identity crisis. There were times as a young boy. I thought maybe there's something wrong with the color of my skin. Because everyone keeps telling me there's something wrong with me. So all of this trauma was building up inside me, and it made me a very aggressive person. And because of that aggression, I was lucky to a certain extent that martial arts allowed me to channel that in a different way. But I was still an aggressive person. And that showed in my personality, in the way I spoke, in the way I talked, in the way I looked at people. People didn't like me because I was very scary. I mean, as you can see, I'm not, I'm 6'2", yeah, and I've always been handy, and I've been very athletic. So, and my fuse is very short. I don't suffer fools very easy. And if anybody gives me the big one, I'm going for them. So that, caused me a lot of problems in my relationships, even, when I was, with my family and all of that. So that's basically the young boy, Shahid Butt, how he grew up and the kind of, environment that he grew up in. Like I said, there's a lot more, but, it's going to become a long conversation.
So, how does that then lead on to the 90s? And maybe there's a Islamic awakening almost of the Muslim community, and there's different parts of the world being discussed. And then obviously that leads us on to the Bosnian War. Where did you fit in all of this?
In the late 90s, late 80s, 89, 90, I had that crisis of conscience. I asked that question to myself: what's the purpose of my life? Because I was going around chasing my tail from no education, no job, running around on the streets, getting involved with gangs, fighting, criminality, and all the other associated stuff. Then I managed to blag my way into a decent job in sales for an insurance company, Legal and General, which is still a big company now. And I managed to work my way up because I was, as you may have noticed, I've got the bit, I know how to talk. I did very well. I actually got a company car. Yeah, it was a Nissan Bluebird. Back in those days, that was not a joke because it had electric windows and power steering, and cars didn't have that. You know what I mean? And I had that as a company car. I got a company phone which you put on your shoulder like a duffel bag. So I was living the life. I was earning good money, and then in true fashion, I ended up spending it on Giorgio Armani suits and Hugo Boss suits, and just I plundered it all. I didn't save any money. I lost my job, so I went from no money to loads of money to buying fancy clothes and going up and down and having nice cars, back to zero again. And at that point, when I was at my lowest ebb, was when I asked that question: what is the point of my life? Am I just going to go around in bloody circles chasing my tail? Yeah, there's got to be more to life than this. So then I started to look into my culture. I thought maybe that's where I need to look into. So as a Pakistani, I started to look into my culture. I'm sorry to say, but I didn't really find anything in my culture that really attracted me, other than, it was just, anyway, that's another story here. So then obviously, I'm supposed to be a Muslim. Yeah. Not that I ever prayed, or not that I even knew what Islam was. I knew the few basic things here and there, but no way was I at all, what you would call a practicing Muslim. So I started to investigate Islam. Now we're talking about the early 90s. We never had internet or whatever. So you had to physically go sit in a dars, or you had to go and buy books. So I spent a bit of money and I bought all the hadith books, all the Sayyid Sitta, Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Imam, the Muwatta, everything. I had like a whole, pile of books. The Quran in English translation. I bought the Seerah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The first one I read was Martin Ling's, and then I read the Seal Nectar. And then for weeks and months, I just read and read and read. And the more I read, the more I needed to read. I was like a thirsty person in a desert, that no matter how much water I drank, I was still thirsty. Because even though on the exterior, I was this rough and tough, hard geezer, knock you out, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. And that bravado that I'd built around that sort of persona that I'd built. But really inside, I was just a hollow shell. I was basically full of shit. But because I was, because of my background and who I was, I pulled it off. I managed to, to do what I had to do. But really, there was nothing inside me. Now, also, you got to remember that I'm not really very well educated in that time. So a lot of the words I never understood, a lot of the meanings I didn't understand. So I just kept reading the Quran translation, beginning to the end, the hadith, this, that. So for months and months, all I'm doing is reading. I'll be reading up to Fajr time, then pray Fajr, then go to sleep. Unbeknown to me, what that did was, and the analogy that I can give you is of a computer. A computer has a hard drive, and then it has a RAM. The RAM is for the quick stuff, and the hard drive is where you put all the stuff that you don't actually need straight away. But when you do need it, your RAM taps into your hard drive and it pulls that out. So in the same way, I had information at the front of my, what's it called, the frontal lobe, which I could access straight away. Yeah. But then I had all this other stuff that I'd been reading, which had gone into my subconscious. Unbeknown to me, I'm saying all this now after all these years. At the time, I don't know this because now I've studied and I've understood about psychology and how it works. But what was happening was that my brain, my subconscious was full of Quran and Hadith. That's it. There was no Babe, there was no Peets, there was no saints, there was no sheikhs, there was no ulama, there was no Maulana, there was nothing. It was just Allah and His Rasul. From Bukhari, Muslim, that's it. No, I didn't read any other books. So all my subconscious had that as a background. So then when I started to practice and I started to pray, I got into conflict with people because when they were telling me to do some other stuff, my hard drive would kick in. We'll say, well, hold on. But Allah says that only ask me for help. So why do I need to go to that guy and ask him to ask on my behalf? No, but you don't. No, but I do understand. To me, Islam is very simple. Allah says, call upon me. Otherwise, what's the difference between me and a Christian who goes through other people? So because of my programming, that then led me into a lot of, conversations, debates and whatever. And because I was very sharp at that time, my tongue was very sharp, I became quite a big debater with people as well. So I used to go to city centre here in Birmingham, like you in London, you've got your speaker's corner. We had our version. So we'd have Christians and the Jesus Army, and there'd be me standing on the milk crate, having it out with them, and I was a big fan of Ahmadiyya at the time as well. So I'd read all his books. I actually sat on a 3-day training course with Ahmadiyya when he came to Birmingham. So I'd learned all the passages, if a Christian says this, say this, Then I'd go into town and I'd look for these Jesus Army and these Christian missionaries, and I'd ask them these loaded questions. So I became very active on the Dawah scene in the early 90s as well. And then obviously, I did Hajj, which was kind of the cream, the cherry on the cake for me. I took my mother and we did Hajj in 91. Early 90s. I can't remember exactly what year it was. And then when I came back, it was a new lease of life. So it's like I was born again. I'm going to start fresh. I want to be a good person. I want to learn more about my deen. I want to become a good person. I want to promote Islam. I want to defend Islam. I want to protect Islam. I did nothing about jihad at the time, even though I read about it, but there was no connection at that time. On the Jummah, I was coming out of the masjid after the Jummah prayers, and there was a guy standing outside with a big cardboard box, and he had video cassettes in there. You know what a video cassette is, don't you? Yeah. Some of the youngsters probably won't know what that is, because you put it in a VCR. It was crazy. So I took this video cassette, and on there it said massacres in Bosnia and Croatia. And I thought, okay, Bosnia and Croatia, what's that? I never even heard of it. I took the video cassette home. Then not the same day, but the next day I plugged it in. I watched it, and I was absolutely horrified and shocked. It was, you wouldn't be able to show it now because it was raw and uncut. I'm talking about, dead bodies, males' genitalia cut off, because the Serbs would cut off the penises of the men and put them on a tray. They, pregnant women cut open, because the Serbs had a bet, is it a boy or a girl? And they would cut the fetus open. So I'm saying, even with today, unless it's on the dark web, you wouldn't see this sort of stuff, Now, you can imagine how traumatizing that is. Now, I thought I was a hard geezer. I've come in from the streets, I've been stabbed, I've been jumped, I've been battered, I've got stitches, I've been bricked in their head and barred in their head and all that stuff here. But even I wasn't ready for what I saw. And it shook me to the core, to the extent that I was watching it and I was crying as I was watching it. And I'm a tough geezer, back, especially in those days. I'm a bit soft now, but in those days I was a tough guy, but I was crying. That broke me completely. And I thought to myself, and I remember, and I haven't forgotten, I said to myself, what kind of human being, what kind of evil, depraved human being can do that to another human being? I couldn't even comprehend doing that to my worst enemy. I couldn't understand how they could do that. That just shook me to the core, to the extent that I said, right, I've got to do something about this. I need to help these people. Within 2 weeks of watching that video, I found out that there was a local charity that was going to Bosnia. They were taking coaches from the UK filled with aid. They were going to go to Bosnia, give the aid out, and bring refugees back to the UK. You could do that in those days. Not like now. A lot of the Bosnian diaspora that you see here in Birmingham are people that we brought back from the 90s. Amongst the elders, they all know my name. They all know who I am because they know what I did afterwards. So I jumped on this coach. They were going to come back in a week or two or whatever. So I told my wife, I had 2 kids at the time. And obviously, my wife is like, what are you doing? Where are you going? And, she just had to, there's nothing she could do about it anyway, but but she was confused as to, I don't understand, why do you have to go and all that, but I went anyway. We drove to Bosnia, we got to Croatia, we got to Zagreb. Cut a long story short, because there's too much information to give, maybe you can talk about it in some other point, but they were told that they can't cross into Bosnia because the border's closed. So they decided to give out the aid on the Croatian side where the refugee camps were also. Me being a bit of a rebel, I'm like, nah, bro, you can't be doing that. We said we're going to go to Bosnia. My niyyah is to go into Bosnia. They said, well, you can't go because the border's closed. I'm like, F that. I don't care about no border. So I fell out with them. I'm mooching around because there was there was in Zagreb, there was like a big building which had been used by all the charity organizations. So they kind of hired it. So everybody would come there, they had a little masjid in there, you could sleep there and blah, blah, blah. So I'm mooching around this building, with my chin on the floor thinking, what the hell, man, how am I going to get into Bosnia? And then I'm sitting down and I'm having a coffee and, I'm just talking to some brothers and they asked me and I said this and they go, oh, okay. You know what? See that brother over there sitting on the table? Yeah, he's from London. North Finchley, and he's a private guy, aid stuff, and he's going into Bosnia. I said, okay. So I went up to him. I said, Assalamu alaikum. He said, wa alaikum salam. Told me his name, and basically he said, do you? I said, bro, look, this, that, and the other. I said, I want to go to Bosnia. Can I come with you? He goes, yeah, sure. He goes, I'm going on my own. Yeah, my truck's empty. It's just me. You can come. I said, how are you going to get in? He goes, oh, I've got some local Croatians and some Bosnians. They smuggled me in through the back passes, mountain passes. I'm like, wicked. So he goes, we're leaving at Fajr. Next day, prayed Fajr, jumped in the van with the truck with him. We're driving over the mountain borders, into Bosnia. We've gone into Bosnia. Now, our plan was to get to Travnik in central Bosnia. Normally, it would have been from where we were, probably about 2-3 hours in a straight run. But because of the front lines were moving all the time, so you have to go this way, then you got to go that way, then you got to go that way, then you got to come around this way, and you don't know. And sometimes we'd be driving into a village, and on the outskirts, the Bosnians would come and say, "No, nema, it's been taken over last night by the Serbs. You know what I mean? They call by Chetniks." And blah blah blah. Don't go that way. It's dangerous. So then we have to turn around. So we kind of played it by ear.
What year is this?
This was mid 92, mid to late 92. Yeah, because the weather was okay. So it must have been sort of like autumn, summertime probably. Yeah. We eventually, it took about 2 days. There's loads of stories I can tell you about what happened in those 2 days, how we got stopped and we got taken out and we got gunpoint and blah blah blah. But I'll just sort of go through it a bit more with not so much detail. But we got to Travnik. We headed towards a school, no, the masjid. So there's a big masjid in central Travnik. I mean, this masjid was about 500 years old. It had like all this old timber in there and everything. So we prayed. And we spoke to the imam and we said, look, we've got aid in the truck and we want to give it out. He said, yeah, no problem. He said, look, there's a school down the road which has been converted into a refugee camp. Go there and they'll help you out. Gone to this school, and the people that were there, the volunteers, they came out. Oh, mashallah, thank you very much. Come in. They gave us like a classroom inside, which like this space that we're in now. And so we unloaded all of our aid into the classroom. It was already in bags, pre-packed bags. We put a table by the door. And so I was given the responsibility of handing out the food packs. So they brought all the mothers and the kids and the refugees and all that. They lined them up. So one by one, they're coming. I'm handing them a food pack, Did all of that, gave all the aid out, turned around and, I looked empty. Everything's been given out. And for a split second, I had a big smile on my face. And I was quite chuffed with myself, I'm like, done something worthwhile, coming from the streets of Birmingham, not getting any education. In my parents' eyes, see, I was a failure because my parents wanted to become a doctor or an accountant or a barrister or whatever. Become and get a good rishta and get married. And, I was just a dossa, basically, in and out, gangs, fighting, prison. So in their eyes, I was a failure. So to me, it was like a big achievement to have actually, I'm actually here in a war zone and I've come out of there and I've come all this far. But my happiness was short-lived because when I came out of the classroom, I looked to my left and there was still a line of mothers with their kids. And I had to walk past them all. And even though I didn't understand their language, I knew what they were saying to me. What about us? Are you not going to give us anything? I got to the end of the corridor. And then you got to understand as well, because I've skipped through a lot of the stuff. I'm in Bosnia. I'm in this situation. It's a roller coaster of emotions. Physically seeing a refugee camp on the news is not the same as physically seeing it. When you smell the stench of vomit and death and decomposing bodies, the screams and the crying of children, the wailing of the mothers, and the way their cry of despair is not like a normal cry. It's something that pierces your heart. And even to this day, it's etched inside my soul, what I saw and what I heard over that period of time, which is why the fire never goes out of me. I'm talking to you now and you can see the fire in my face. Yeah, you can hear the fire in my voice. It's been nearly 35 years, but I still have that. Because why? Because that trauma has etched into my soul. I'll never forget it. It's not something that I learned from a book, or I watched a video, or I heard some sheikh talking about it. It's my lived life, personal, smelt, breathed, saw with my own eyes experience that will never ever leave me. When I got to the end of the corridor, I stopped. I turned around and I looked at them. And I'll be quite honest with you, I started crying. And as I was crying, there was tears in my eyes, and I was thinking to myself, I've got no money to give them. I've got no more food to give them. What do I do for these people? What can I give these people? How can I help these people? And that's when my default setting, my basic instinct kicked in. At the end of the day, I'm a street fighter. I'm from the streets, aren't I? That's where I came from. No matter how many suits I wear, no matter how many posh accents or posh words I use, at the end of the day, I'm just a guy off the streets who only knows one thing, and that's to fight. So that's when I decided that I'm going to stay in Bosnia and I'm going to join the Mujahideen and I'm going to fight for these people. And that's what I did. And then that's when that part of the story started.
Jazakallah khair. How does that then transpire into today when I look at online or look at the different documentaries that you've been part of or the different interviews? They call you like one of the main guys, the person who spearheaded it, the person who main connector. When I've spoken to other people as well, they've constantly your names come up in conversation. You have to interview Shahid Butt. You have to speak to him. He knows the stories. He's the one that was organizing. He's the one that dealt with it. Okay, so I'm stopping the interview there just for a short moment. So we had to take a short pause, and then we reconvened and we continued. Hope you've enjoyed the story of Shahid Butt so far, but let's continue his story. We took a small break and now we are recontinuing, inshallah. So we're just at the point where you finished off the story in the first trip of Bosnia, and then I asked, then how did that transpire into other trips and you becoming the main face of the kind of fight or the jihad against in Bosnia and organizing things?
So what happened was that me going there, remember I didn't plan on going there to join the Mujahideen. I went there as an aid worker, but when I saw what was going on, I realized that just giving aid is not enough and I need to be part of the resistance. But then when that happened, I'll tell you a little story about that as well, because so as I said to you, we're in this, we came back to that, after the school, we came back to the masjid, and the guy I was with was going to go back to Croatia and back over the border. So they said, right, okay, so in the morning, we're after Fajr, we're going to leave. So obviously now, I'd already made up my mind, but I hadn't told him. So when we got back to the masjid, then we were planning about, right, we're going to be leaving in the morning. I said, look, bro, I need to tell you something. And he said, what? I said, I'm going to stay. And he was like, are you crazy? So all night, literally till Fajr time, he's trying to talk me out of it. Yeah. And I go, no, but I made up my mind, I'm going to stay. He goes, but what are you going to do? You don't speak the language, you're in a foreign country, it's a war zone, and I mean, I get where he was coming from. He felt, responsible because he's the one that brought me. And I said, don't worry about it. I said, look, here's a letter. When you get to England, just post it to my family. Because we never had mobile phones or anything like that in those days, yeah. And if I get a chance, I'll see if I can get in contact with them via the satellite phone in here from somewhere. So he's like, he got, it's like one of those like those Hollywood movies where Fajr time comes, he gets in his van, bro, last chance. I'm going now, bro, don't worry, I'm good, you go. He's getting in the car, opens the window, bro, last chance. I go, just go, man, you know what I mean? Just leave me alone. He's driving down the road and he's, the sun is rising because it was Fajr time. So the sun's rising. He's going. I can see the back of his light disappearing into the sun, into the sunrise, as he's going down the road. And then literally the vehicle lights disappeared. And then I sat down outside the masjid and I thought, yo, this is for real, bro. He's gone. I'm here. So I'm sitting outside. I'm sitting on the steps of the masjid. It's sunset. And I'm sitting there and basically I'm thinking, right, what do I do now? And as I'm thinking that, a 4x4 drives up to me, and I'm looking, I'm thinking, that's a kind of 4x, it was a Nissan Patrol. I'm like, that's the kind of 4x4 you need around here, I'm in this rugged terrain and all that, yeah. It pulls up, sees me, the window comes down, and there's this guy in there with a big, massive beard, camouflage on, yeah, with henna in his beard. And he's like, Assalamu alaikum, kayf al-hal, man anta? Yeah, and I'm like, wa alaikum salam, no Arabic, yeah, English. He goes, who are you? What are you doing? What do you want? What are you doing here? And I just looked at him and I thought, well, he's a Muslim, he looks like a soldier. I said, I'm looking for the Mujahideen. Yeah. he smirked and he goes, okay, come, I take you. Oh, I thought, wicked. Yeah, I threw my bag on the back seat. Yeah, I jumped in the Nissan Patrol. I'm sitting there thinking, yo, yeah, man, this is a proper ride, man. You know what I mean? And he goes, well, I'm just gonna pick somebody and then we go. I'm like, hit the jackpot, bro. He picked up some Bosnians, big, they all like bloody lumberjacks, camouflage. And the next thing you know, on the back, because they open the back, man's putting in their machine guns, AKs, ammunition. I'm thinking, I'm looking at it, I'm going, yo, this is the real deal, bro. These are the proper guys. It takes me just outside traveling. There's a school that they were using as their camp. And so they pull up in the courtyard and all the people are there, the brothers, everybody. And then when he came out, I noticed that everybody was like very, not saluting him, but when somebody important comes here and they give him that Assalamu alaikum Sheikh, like this, yeah, kind of like, talking, shaking. And I thought, oh, this guy seems to be someone quite important. So then he grabbed this guy. He was a Lebanese brother because he spoke English, and he goes, translate for him. Yeah, and you basically buddy up with him because he doesn't speak Arabic, so you can translate. So he became my mate. because he was Lebanese and he spoke English, yeah. And then I said to him, I said, as we were walking, he said, "Come on, brother, come and follow me," yeah. And I said, "What's with this guy? Who's this guy anyway?" Yeah. He goes, "Oh, that's Abu Abdulaziz. He's the leader of the Mujahideen in Bosnia." I'm like, Subhanallah, look who Allah sent. He didn't just send anybody. He sent me the leader. And how random was that, bro? You know what I mean? That he would be driving past at that time, yeah, and I'd be sitting outside that masjid at that time. You know, these were small things that happened, you know, that more and more reinforced my belief that I was on the haqq and that what I was doing was the truth. Because I was just winging it, bro. I never had a clue what I was doing. I didn't know nothing. I've never held a gun in my life. The only military training I did, yeah, was watching First Blood and Rambo, yeah, and Rocky movies. That was it. And fighting on the streets with hockey sticks and baseball bats and pool cues. That was it. That was my limit of my military training. So, you know, so obviously that's a whole another story. But what happened was that I came back. I did some basic training, went to the front line, and then I came back to the UK. And when I came back, I became this focal point for this now, because obviously everybody knew what I had done. Yeah, people, what's it like? What happened? This and that. And I found myself becoming the you know, the poster boy or the you know, the figurehead of all of this. And then I started to, you know, obviously I was on my own journey of learning my deen and everything, and started to research more about jihad and about, you know, the benefits and all the hadith and this and that. And obviously, you know, for me, it was natural. I was captivated by Surah Tawbah, you know. I mean, it's almost like, you know, that's there it is, bro. You know what I mean? What is the matter with you? Yeah, that when the people from the village who are weak and oppressed are saying, "Oh Allah, will you not send someone to us to help us?" And I'm like, that's me. I'm the guy that goes there, and there's those weak, oppressed Bosnian Muslims in those villages, because I've been there, and that's exactly what they're saying. Are you going to help us? And I'm like, this ayah was made for me. You know what I mean? So all of these realizations were going on. And then all the hadith, there's so many hadith about the Prophet ﷺ, you know, about jihad and shahada and about, you know, fighting. And in the Quran, you know, says, you know, not equal are those who give water to the pilgrims, yeah, as to those who go out and fight in jihad. I'm like, mate, all you lot, what are you talking about? Yeah. And that's when I became like a lone voice. And in a way, I don't want to, it's a big thing to say, but I don't, you know, I'm not trying to say that I was the one, but it was like reviving the whole jihad again. Nobody even knew about it. It wasn't spoken about in any khutbah, you know, nobody talked about these things. So I started to become this guy who would literally go around, talk to this group, talk to that group. In the 90s, I became the main recruiter of people to take them to Bosnia. I took dozens of people to Bosnia. I won't say some of the names because you probably know who they are, you know, but I took lots of people to Bosnia. Then after that, when I was in Bosnia as well, on one of the trips, and then I would get the brothers who wanted to go. I would collect aid, I would collect money, and we would drive over. First, we'd give out all the aid, then we'd give the money, and we'd help the people, and then we'd go to Zenica, where the headquarters was, and then I'd enroll them, and then we'd go to the front lines and do further training. While I was there, and this was also another place now where a lot of people were there from all over the world. You had almost every race that you could think of from the Muslim Ummah was there. Some of these guys who were the higher, more seniors were ex-Afghanistan, who had fought against the Russians, who were there now training the brothers. When I used to speak to them, they would say, look, we're not developed here, our training, we're early stages, because obviously now I'm bitten by the bug. You know, deep down inside, I always wanted to be a soldier. Yeah, you know, when I was 18 years old, I tried to join the Royal Marine Commandos, yeah, in the UK. Thank God I failed, yeah. But at the time, I was really, really wanted to join. I failed the test, and then they said to me, come back after a year. And I came back after a year. My mom was crying, no, don't do it, this and that and everything. No, man, I want to be a soldier. I'm gonna, you know. And for me, it was not about joining no infantry. I wanted to join the special forces. I've always had that, you know. It's got to be the top thing. They failed me again. You know, I was naive. Yeah, they're not gonna get a packy boy. Yeah, you know me, to join the most elite Royal Marine Commando, you know, of the British Special Forces. You know, me, Pakistani guy, you know me, with no military background. But at the time I was naive. I thought, yeah, you know, why can't I join, you know what I mean, kind of thing. So they said, the brothers in Bosnia, Afghanistan is the place to be. Because that's where all the action is. If you want to become properly trained, because I want to do commando training, they said, you need to go there. And again now, sorry, yeah.
Just before you move on to that, describe for some of the new generation who are listening to this, when you say Bosnia and there was a war going on, what exactly was taking place? What did the front lines look like? Who were the opposition? What was the training like, for example? Like those kind of details, so we get more of a picture of the actual war.
So the Bosnians were obviously heavily outnumbered. The Muslims. There was an arms embargo against them. So everybody else is armed, but the Muslims can't be armed. The Bosnians themselves didn't really have much of an army. And also you've got to understand the context. The Bosnia had just recently been, you know, become independent. Before that, it used to be called Yugoslavia. Then it broke up into Croatia, Serbia, and Bosnia, Herzegovina. Now, prior to that, these Muslims living in Bosnia had lived under communism rule, under Tito, where Islam was banned. Islam was taught underground. You couldn't have a beard. You couldn't wear a hijab. It was like completely, you can't even raise your head. You'd be finished. You get killed. You get put into prison. The level of oppression that these Bosnians went through, that they were denied their basic rights to practice their religion, that they knew inside they had a seed of Islam inside them, but outwardly they were not allowed to show it. So generation of generations had developed this kind of, you know, outward appearance is all non-Muslim, but inside we still love Islam, but they were never allowed to show it. And you can draw a lot of similitudes to Bosnia at that time and the UK today, because despite what we might think in the UK, that we have freedom of religion, and look, we got a masjid on every corner and this and that, they had a masjid on every corner. Serbs, Croats, Muslims, they were all neighbors. They lived next door to each other. But when it kicked off, that same Serb pulled out his sniper and he shot his neighbor and shot their children. Yeah, because they were Muslims. In this country, if you want to bring it to this time, look at what's going on around us. Look at all this far right and all this, everything, the othering of us and bashing Muslims grooming gangs, Muslim pedophiles, Muslim immigration, this, that, get them out of here, blah, blah. This is all the same kind of rhetoric that happened to the Bosnians. It happened to the Jews before the Holocaust. Yeah, you know what I mean? That, these Jews, and they created the pogroms and all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of similarity to that. And, I remember once when I came back from one of my trips to Bosnia, and I came back, and as I was, going around, and there's a local masjid here, I won't say the name of it because it'd be embarrassing for them. And I went there and I said, look, I've come back from Bosnia, and can I just address your congregation? One, just to tell them what's going on, and if they want to make any donation, fine, but more to just enlighten them what's happening. They said no. I go, why? He goes, no, we don't do politics, surprise, surprise. And and I said, but they're Muslims and this and that and everything. And I'm arguing with them, with all the old uncles from the committee. And you know what one of them said to me? He said, they deserve it because they left their deen, and this is Allah's punishment. So don't be stressed about it. And I looked at him and I said, Uncle, mark my words. One day in this country where you feel safe, they're going to come and they're going to kick your door down, and they're going to grab you by the beard, and they're going to grab your wife by the hair, and they're going to drag you out onto the streets. And you know what you're going to cry out for? Oh, brothers, help me, yeah? And I go, you know who the brothers are going to help you? Me and these brothers that you see here. Because even though you don't want to help those brothers and sisters in Bosnia, but we're not Bagharat like you, we will still help you, because you're a Muslim, and when you cry, we will come to your defense. When the riots happened, when we had the attacks on the masjids, I was getting these flashbacks. these masjids being attacked by these far right. And here's the thing now. Ask yourself this question. Generally speaking, who came to the defense of the masjids in Birmingham, in London, and all that? When you look at the makeup of the people, who was it? The young people. The guys that don't even pray were the ones that were standing outside the masjid. I want to know, where were the committee members and the uncles from the other masjids? Why didn't they come to the defense of that masjid? Why didn't I see them there? There's 200 here in Birmingham. I was there. There's 200-300. They're all youngsters, bellies on their face. Yeah, they weren't the best behaved, but a lot of them were jahil. But they had a seed in their heart of Islam, of Iman, that this is our masjid. Okay, I'm a bad guy. I sell drugs. I drink alcohol. I check gal, but I'm still a Muslim in his mind, and that's our masjid. Now, mate, you're not touching that. That's the level of their iman, and you people sitting in the masjid every single day, giving big khutbahs in your big turbans and your big stomachs. Yeah, you never came out to defend the other masjid. Why? You believe in the masjid. You wabi in the masjid. Oh, this is their masjid. You're stuck in that bullshit. Yeah. Whereas Islam is like, nah. When we come under attack, we all come together. But then you people go, oh, why the youth don't come to the masjid? Because they look at you as an example and thinking, if you represent Islam, I want nothing to do with Islam. Because we've lost our heroes. We've lost our role models in Islam. Yeah, even in the modern day as well, because these people have captured everything. They control the assets of the Muslims. They control the money. They control the charities, everything they control. Yet they have no value whatsoever when it comes to the people outside, because they look at them as losers, and nobody wants to be a part of a losing team. So there's a lot of similarities in the context of what happened in Bosnia and what's happening in the UK. And I hope and pray that it doesn't come to the fact where we start getting killed en masse. But if it does, I know one thing, I'm ready. Are you ready?
Back to the situation in Bosnia. So you went back and forth a few times, and I asked you to just describe more of the actual war. Like, how bad was it really? Because the new generation have no idea what actually happened in that war. I know there's a very famous story of Srebrenica, but what was actually going on, and what did the front lines look like? Who were you guys fighting?
Well, Srebrenica was a genocide and a massacre. That wasn't a war. I was stationed in a place called Zavidovic. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And it was basically the front line, one of the front lines. And the front line, the way this was consisted of, was that there were 3 mountains, like next to each other, with 1, 2, and then 3. The Serbs were on the mountains, and we were on the low ground in the hills. Yeah, the front line, the trenches were built there. So you had the trenches. So literally, we were so close that you could see the Serbs. Yeah, if you look through your scope, you can see them. If you've got really good eyesight, you could actually see them, moving around or whatever. But they're in trenches as well. So they were on sort of lower level, and then they had the heavy guns and all that on the higher. So for those of you who don't know, in warfare, whoever controls the high ground is in an advantageous position. So we were in a disadvantaged position. This particular front line had been there for about 2 years. And it was all, held by the Bosnians. So they would rotate, a group would come, a group would go, and so when we got there, there was like, we were like, because when I first went, I was my group that I was in for training was the second group ever that was trained in Bosnia. The first group had just done, and we were the second group. So a lot of the guys who were in the second group that were training with me, later on became leaders of battalions or hierarchy, because they'd been there, because they stayed there longer, and because they were Arabs and they spoke the lingo, and so that's why it's like a lot of the hierarchy knew me because I was in that second group. But anyway, so we were in these trenches. So I actually remember, when they say that when you talk to real soldiers, they tell you that war is not a nice place. war is not what you see in Hollywood. Yeah, I found that out as well. Because the very first night, they put us into the back of these trucks. They took us from the back line. They didn't tell us where we were going. It was pitch black, dark, freezing cold, trucking along in the truck. Everybody out, everybody out, everybody out. Yeah, single file. Yeah, still don't know where we are. Can't see shit. Yeah, you know, and we don't have no night vision or whatever. And literally, we just followed the guy in front. And then all I remember is going up and up and up these hills, yeah, and then going down and down, then up and up here. And eventually, then right, okay, we got to the trenches, and I was just like, so you in that one, still pitch black. I'm like literally just kind of, you know, because I'm, you know, tall, and I just about got in, and I crawled my way into this trench. Yeah, and I'm lying down like this with my knees in my face. A couple of the other guys are there next to me, you know, and we're like sort of like, he's looking at me and I'm looking at him, and like we're like, to be honest, yeah, we were shit scared. I was like, what the hell is this? Yeah, and he's looking at me and I'm looking at him. Yeah, and he's like, yo, bro, you know, kind of like, what? And he's like, oh, I don't know. Yeah, just shut your mouth and just do what they say in there. Just lie there. We're in this trench, all curled up here, huddled together because it was freezing cold. Yeah. And then, like, literally, we just sort of I fell asleep. And when I fell asleep, I had a dream that this was a dream. And in my dream, I woke up and I was in my bed. I was in my house, and I'm like, oh, thank God, man. It was just a dream. I was dreaming that I was in this place or whatever, yeah? And that's how crazy. And then when I actually woke up, yeah, I looked and I'm actually in the trench. I go, oh, no, it's not a dream. It was real. I'm here. Then the sun rose. Well, before the sun rose, we got up and we prayed Fajr, and you know, then we came out, and you know, it became a little bit more okay. Took a bit of a breath, yeah, you know, and it was snowing actually. Yeah, I remember now. It was snowing, and because I remember we made wudu with the snow, so got the snow and then put it on our face and put it on our arms, and you know, did all this sort of stuff. Did tayammum because we had our socks and boots on, yeah, and then we prayed. And then after that, you know, the sun came up and then it got a bit warmer and then you could see everything. And then, oh, okay, now I know where we are now. We're on a ridge, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so this carried on for, you know, we used to do rotations, yeah. And on one of the rotations I was there, I was talking to some of the Arab brothers, and he goes to me, he goes, you know, when we first came here, you know why we came here? I said, why? He goes, because the Bosnians had asked us that, to the Mujahideen, because the Mujahideen had their own brigade. It was directly under Ali Izetbegovic. Yeah, it was called Quwwat al-Khasa, Muslim Sanaga or something. I forgot the name, how to pronounce it. Basically, Muslim Special Forces. Yeah, which is what our brigade was, and it was directly under the command of Ali Izetbegovic, who was the president of Bosnia at the time. I think he came to the camp once, but I wasn't there. Anyway, so they said that what they did, they came to us and said, look, we've got this front line. We've held it for this nearly 2 years now, and we're not going anywhere yet. And we're getting a bit worried now because they're getting a bit frisky on the other side, the Serbs. Can you do us a favor? Can you send us 10 Arabs, yeah, and make sure they've all got walkie-talkies? And he goes, what's 10 Arabs going to do? He goes, we just want to put one. We want to put 2 in each trench, spread them out here. And he goes, all they got to do is speak Arabic to each other. He goes, why? He goes, because they're listening to the conversations on the walkie-talkies, and they knew that when they hear Arabs talking, they know the Mujahideen is here. They don't know how many, but they all look at alhamdulillah, like this, yeah. Basically, the Serbs shit their pants because the Mujahideen are here. So then they would do the adhan loud, yeah, you know, and they can tell that this is an Arab doing it, yeah. And this was the kind of psyops warfare that was going on. As crazy and as basic as it sounds, that's what was happening. Then after that, there was a big. Then the Mujahideen got together and said, "Look, you know, we can't have this status quo." They went out. They done recce. They sussed everything out. So we're going to do an operation. The operation was called the Black Lion. Yeah, there's actually a video cassette of it as well. Back in the days, it's very grainy. I don't know. You know. I mean, I don't know where it is now. You might be able to find it on YouTube or something like that. It's called the Operation Black Lion. And the brother that was leading that operation, he was an African brother, yeah, Muslim, and he was Shahid in that, yeah. And he was leading from the front. And in the video, you can see a sniper shoots him in the head, and he's got like a hole in his head. Yeah, and it's in the video as well, and it was called the Black Lion. That operation, 2 years now, they haven't been able to move an inch either way. Yeah, so the plane is boobied, is mined, and then you got the Serb trenches, and then you got the high ground. Yeah, so you couldn't go forward. Yeah, the Mujahideen took that 1, 2, 3 peaks, the whole area in about 3-4 hours. Literally, you on the video you can see he's on that one peak doing the adhan. That means that he's been taken. Then he's on the next. There's another brother on the next peak. They're showing on the video. Yeah, he's doing the adhan. Within 3-4 hours, the whole area was taken. They ran through the minefields. They ran. There's a dua that you read. It's gone out of my head now. You know, oh Allah, protect me from what's above, from my right, from my left, and min taht. You know what I mean? And from underneath as well. Yeah. And the Prophet said that's talking about things like landmines. Read that dua before you go, and no landmine will blow you up. And they literally, so there's so many, yeah, there's so many stories. You know, I remember once when we were in one of the operations. So you have our trenches, their trenches, and then we would basically it got to a stage where right, that's it. We're just gonna just charge the trench, yeah. You got to understand here that with me there were brothers who were, and I don't mean this in a derogative way. There were brothers that were like 5'2", 5'3", yeah. Some of them were like 18 years old, 19 years old. There were some Yemenis, and you know Yemenis are a bit short. Some of them were, yeah. But they'd fought in Afghanistan, yeah. And there were some Algerians, and there were some Moroccans and North Africans. And, you know, maybe because I'm maybe exceptionally tall, yeah, compared to them. This one guy, we used to call him Babyface, because he had glasses and he looked like a baby. Yeah, you know what I mean? Because he had no hair, yeah, and he had like clear skin, he had glasses on. And he was about 18, 19, but he looked about 12. Yeah. This guy, he charged the trench, full frontal. He charged the trench. And literally, he jumped on top of the trench. The Serbs are underneath. And they were so scared that the guns were shaking in their hands. They run out of bullets, and he's trying to reload his mag, and he can't get it. He can't clip it in. And like this here, pop, pop, pop. He's taking them out. Yeah. Those Serbs were then captured. Some of them were. They were taken back to the back lines. And then they were, interrogated by the brothers, and this has been recorded, but it's been lost now. You know, I don't know where these tapes are and whatever. Because so, these things should have been kept. Yeah, the Serbs were saying, "We just want to ask you one question. Yeah, who were those guys in the white clothes?" And they're like, "Bro, are you crazy? Everyone's wearing camouflage." What do you mean white clothes? You don't wear. It's you're in a foresty area. Wearing white clothes, you're going to stand out. He goes, no. He goes, there were tall men, white clothes, flowing robes, big black beards, and they had swords in their hands. He goes, we weren't scared of you. We were scared of them, because when they struck, it was like an earthquake. Now, these are Serbs saying these stories. We knew, but I didn't actually know. It took me a bit of time to work it out. But the more religious brothers knew that he's talking. These are the malaika that Allah promises in the Quran that when you go out in the path of jihad and fight against the enemies, Allah will send the malaika down to fight amongst you like He did in Badr. So it's like there's so many stories like that, bro. You know what I mean? Yeah, you got to understand, it's not that we were strong or we were powerful or we were some kind of, special forces commando. Bro, we're nothing. We're nothing. We're just a bunch of Joes who came from the streets of Birmingham. Yeah. And literally Allah put us in that position, but it wasn't us. Because Allah says, your job is just put your foot forward. I'll do the rest. You just make the niyyah, make the intention. You just get yourself in that place, yeah, and I'll do the rest. And wallahi, brother, that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. There was nothing to do with us. that we were some great fighters, soldiers, or whatever. Yeah, half the time I didn't even know what was going on. You know, it's like, okay, which way? Point me in, or go that direction, or go that direction. So this is the reality of what that war was. But at the same time, you got to understand, war is not a nice place, bro. It's not a nice place. It's a scary place. It's a dark place. It's full of violence, and it's something that you shouldn't wish for. You shouldn't wish for it because it's not a nice place to be. Yeah, we want peace. Yeah, we want to live in harmony. Yeah, live and let live. Yeah, like Allah says in the Quran, "Lakum dinukum waliya din." To you is your religion, and to me is my religion. You leave me, and I'll leave you. No problem. Like we've coexisted for centuries, Muslims, Jews, Christians. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we've coexisted. It's not a problem. We got no beef with you guys. Yeah, and you shouldn't have a beef with us. But if you put your hand on my shoulder, I'm going to put you in the cemetery. You know, I'm a Muslim. I don't turn the other cheek. You slap my cheek, yeah, you're going down. You know, we don't turn the other cheek, but we don't oppress either, and we don't allow ourselves to be oppressed as well. And this is the message that I always like to give to especially to the younger generation. Be proud of who you are. Be proud of your history. Our Islamic history is full of battles. Full of battles from the time of Khalid ibn Walid, yeah, to Salahuddin Ayyubi, yeah, and all the other great heroes, Muhammad al-Fateh, all of these people. Full. Read that history. We are a nation of warriors. We're not a nation of biryani eaters, yeah, and having big stomachs, yeah, and getting manicures and being wussy-wassy and wishy-washy and you know, brother, jog on, mate, yeah. This is not what our deen is about. And another thing that I was saying to qualify this, look at the history of the Sahaba. The Sahaba, they are our role models, not these YouTube influencers and social media influencers. They're not our role models, yeah. Our role models is the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, the Tabi'in, the Tabi'in, yeah, the Salaf Saleh, yeah, the pious predecessors. And you know, for you Hanafis and Shafis and you Brelvis and Deobandis and Sufis, don't take this the wrong way. I'm saying that, he's promoting Salafism. They were called the Salaf Saleh, the pious predecessors. They're your pious predecessors and they're mine. They belong to all of us, not to Ali Hadith or Salafis of today. They belong to all of us. They're ours, the Salaf Saleh. Look at their lifestyles. Brother, these guys, they were lions in the battlefield. Ferocious lions in the battlefield. But when they went home and the wife said, go and get some bread from the shop. He's jogging and go and get the bread. Yeah. I need some help with put this up, that, some housework, do this, do that. Yeah, no problem. And then sometimes that wife would be having a go at him. Why did I tell you to bring the milk and you didn't bring it? And I've been waiting all this time and we had guests and all that. And she's giving him an earful. And what does he do? Oh, okay, yeah, all right, Tiga, okay, sorry, yeah, okay, next time I'll do it, yeah. And that same Sahaba, in the battlefield, he's cutting a man in half with his blade. But when he comes home, that's a masculine man. That's what my definition of an alpha male is. Not flipping Andrew Tutty, yeah, and all the rest of this bullshit, so-called, you know, red pill, pink pill, blue pill, you know, masculinity nonsense here. Nothing to do with us. These are our role models who spent their nights in ibadah, tahajjud, reading Quran, and in the daytime they were in the battlefields. These are the people that who were kind to their wives, who were kind to their children, who used to kiss and hug their children, who used to respect women. These are our people these are people that I follow. So today, what we have now, I see a lot of similarities between what happened in Bosnia, what happened in Burma, what's happening in other conflict zones around the world, the Uyghurs, everywhere. Again, at some point, and I hope it doesn't, but it seems to be going in that direction. And the question we have to ask ourselves, are we ready to defend ourselves as a community?
Jazakallah khair for that insight. That's what I like about your story. And even before recording, there's a lot of valuable insight that you give us. Back to the story, you were mentioning that someone told you about Afghanistan at that time you were in Bosnia, and how if you want to train and you wanted to become a soldier, then Afghanistan is the place to go. So, did you go Afghanistan?
So yeah, what I did was I thought, right, okay, that's where I need to go. Because now look, I'm all in. I'm all in. You know what I mean? I'm like hook, line, and sinker. This is my life. This is what I'm gonna do. And I'll be quite honest with you. My only goal was to be Shahid. So I never even had any plans about life. I never had any plan. Everybody around me was getting a job and building businesses and buying houses and whatever. None of that was of any relevance to me. I'm like, you know what? I ain't even going to be around for too long anyway. You know what I mean? So there's no point in me wasting my time with all of that. I just need to focus on this. So if I wasn't fighting, I was talking about this. If I wasn't talking about it, I was raising awareness about it. So my whole life, was around that. So I never had any connections to this whole Afghanistan thing. So I thought, okay, what I'll do is I'll go to Pakistan, and
This is during the Bosnia War.
this is during the Bosnia War, yeah. So I thought, right, I'll go to Pakistan, and I will see what happens. So I went to Pakistan, went to cousins and all that, and they knew I'd been to Bosnia. So obviously this was a kind of conversation topic, and I said to them, look, yeah, how do you get to Afghanistan, to these camps and all that? And they're like, what are you asking us for? We don't know, you know what I mean? So I was mooching around for a couple of weeks. Then one of my cousins says to me, oh, he goes, there's a conference in today, yeah, and basically it's being done by the Jamaat Islami. He goes, these Jamaat Islami boys, they're like you, yeah, so what did you go and talk to them, and they might be able to help you out. I'm like, wicked. So I went down, I listened to the guys talk, you know what I mean, yeah. And then after the talk, I'm like, because they're on the Kashmir flex, to fighting in Kashmir and all that. So you were recruiting for people to fight in Kashmir and to raise awareness. So I'm like, okay. So I went up to the guy, started talking to him. It turned out that he was one of the high-ranking officials in the Jamaat Islami at the time. And I said, look, this is who I am, and I've come from England, and I want to go. I've been to Bosnia. And as soon as I said that, they were just like, mashallah, brother. You know what I mean? Yeah, you have to come to Lahore. Yeah, because that's where their main markaz is, in Lahore, their main headquarters, and come there, talk to the brothers about your experience of Bosnia and this and that. Yeah. So I went there. They properly looked after me. They treated me really good, gave me a lot of respect. I told them about Bosnia and what was going on and all that. And I said, look, then I spoke to the hierarchies. Look, I want to go to Afghanistan. He said, yeah, no problem. We have training camps in Khost, which is on the other side of in Afghanistan. You go through Miran Shah and then you go into Khost. And he goes, their training camps is called Al Badr, and the training camp they was training people who were going to go to fight in Kashmir. I'm saying, yeah, wicked, sign me up. And he goes, okay. I said, look, I'm going to go back to the UK. I've got some of my boys. They want to get training as well. I'll come back with them. So I came back with quite a few brothers. Yeah, a couple of Jamaican reverts, and some proper rough geezers. You know what I mean? Yeah. And we went over, and they took us to the camp, and that was my introduction. And from there, obviously, we've done a bit of basic training there. Then I met up with some other brothers, and there was a lot of Arabs there as well. They had a different camp and this and that. So I started mixing with people, finding out, and I said, look, we want to do some further training and some, proper, because this is all basic sort of stuff they were showing us. And they go, no problem. Yeah, so me and some of the brothers went back, and me and a couple of brothers stayed, and then we did like about 3 months training course. It was like what you would call like a commando training, sort of like, they call it, special forces commando training. There was a lot more, a lot more sort of tactical, a lot of guerrilla warfare, heavy machinery, tactics and this and that. So there's a lot of, class work as well, but their class work was basically a chalkboard or drawing in the sand, all that sort of stuff. So, and also they taught us, what's called FIBUA, which is fighting in built-up areas, urban warfare. So we did a lot of that as well. They had like all these huts and stuff, which they, like what you see, like SWAT people and all that sort of things that they do. So I then did all of that, came back to the UK, and then I went back a few more times, took some brothers over, came back to Afghanistan. I didn't go to Bosnia back again after that. I went there 2 more times after that. And then in So when in 1995, when the Taliban took over Kabul at that time, I was there. I was actually in that operation when they took over, because what had happened was that the Pakistani Al Badr camp had been taken over by the Taliban, and there was a bit of politics going on here because the Jamaat Islami were supporters of Gulbuddin Hikmatyar, who was the opposite side to the Taliban. Yeah, he came with them afterwards. Yeah, and because they were fully entrenched with him, they kind of closed that camp down, if you know what I mean. Yeah, they did it in a nice way.
This is the end of the Afghan civil war.
Yeah. Because the Taliban are picking up momentum now in '95. Yeah, and they kind of closed them down. And by that time, I had moved away from them anyway, because I was with some other people there, and I kind of formed my own relationships with the wider community of the foreign fighters there. So that when that happened, then so that's why I was there when the Taliban took Kabul. I was actually I was with them in their fighting units with other brothers from Pakistan as well. Then after that, I came back, and obviously, I was just sort of reassessing everything. What am I going to do now? At that time, I had this thought, and this is how ahead of the game I was. I thought, why don't I use my military experience, the contacts that I've got, and set up a security company, what we call today military contractors, go to Muslim countries and offer our services. This is in 97, 98, yeah. So I spoke with a couple of brothers and they said, look, we're going to need a base of operation. Somehow, through some chit-chatting with my friends here and whatever, and one of my friends is a Yemeni, and he said, bro, why didn't you go to Yemen? I go, why Yemen? He goes, bro, it's lawless. Yeah, it's all run by Kabilas. There's no real government, especially down the south, yeah. Everyone's got guns, yeah. You can go there, you can set up a little base of operation so you can do live fire training, and the plan was to set that up in Yemen. And at that time, the whole Kosovo stuff was going on, and my plan was to set that up, get the training for the other brothers, and then we could go as a fighting unit and join the Kosovo, Mujahideen, and help them in their independent struggle.
So your own brigadier?
Yeah, or a unit. It wouldn't be brigade, wouldn't have that many, but like a small unit. And then we could offer them training. We could fight with them on the front lines because we've all been trained and we're all battle hardened and we've got experience. Yeah, so that was the plan. When I got to Yemen, it's another long story, but the short story is that the Qabila that I was working with was run by the Sheikh Abul Hassan al Mehdar. Yeah, if you Google search it all comes up what happened when we got arrested and this and that, and then he got killed by the security services because he was trying to break us out. Yeah, now this was in Abiyan, he was based in there, and I got arrested on the 24th of December 1998 from my hotel room. Well, actually, I wasn't arrested; I was kidnapped. Yeah, because I didn't even know what was going on. They basically just came in. They're the Yemeni authorities, the Mukhabarat. Yeah, they came in plain clothes. They just came in, grabbed me, tore the bed sheets, tied my hands behind my back, put a sack over my head. I thought I'm being kidnapped. I was in my room, I'm watching CNN news. Yeah, and then that was it. And then the other brothers, some of them were in other rooms. They grabbed them as well. Literally threw me down the stairs in the back of a pickup, and then just threw me in a cell. And I'm in this cell. I've got a hood over my head. I've got my hands tied behind my back. And I can hear all these Arabic people talking, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't really speak Arabic much anyway at the time. So I'm like, what's going on? Then eventually they came, they took the hood off, yeah, and then they opened my hands, then they handcuffed me on the front, and then they took me into this room. And I'm looking around, and I can see like uniforms, and I'm thinking, bloody hell, these are coppers, yeah. And then they had a translator there, and then it started basically for 2 weeks. I was in that police station. They tortured us. They forced us to sign confessions for 2 weeks of torture. They beat us and, electric prods and the falaka on your feet. Yeah. And all this stuff. Yeah. Whatever they, punching and slapping and hang you up like a chicken. So after 2 weeks, we, said, yeah, we done it. Yeah. I killed JFK, and we done everything basically. Yeah, you know what I mean. I went to the moon and everything. Yeah, it was all me. It was all me. So they wrote something in Arabic. I signed it. One of my mates actually signed it A, false. Yeah, they don't even know what he was writing anyway. You know what I mean? They made this whole statement in Arabic that we were going to do this terrorism act, and we were going to do this terrorism, we we're going to blow this up, we we're going to kill, and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, made all list of it, and he wrote A, false. Yeah, you know what I mean, in English, and I signed it, and then literally after that, then we got some attention. Because during that time now, our families found out, and there was a massive uproar. So all my family, my friends, because I was well known at the time, they all started kicking up a fuss. They took a whole group. They went to the London to foreign office. Initially, the British government denied that we existed. They go, we don't know who these people are. We don't know what you're talking about. They're like, what do you mean? Don't talk about? They're British citizens. You know what I mean? And eventually they couldn't deny it anymore. Yeah, because then Amnesty International put out a message that we were going to be executed. Yeah, so the whole thing became more of a momentum. In Birmingham, they had a massive demonstration for us. About 5,000 people turned up, you know what I mean? Yeah, and all the speakers and everybody and people from the IRA, Irish people that we've been persecuted as well, and they all came in our support and everybody. Yeah, I found this all out when I came back afterwards. Yeah, and I met some of these people, even some of the lawyers, like Gareth Pierce. Yeah, she was my lawyer. You know what I mean? Yeah, and they basically we went to court, and the first day of court they asked us, and we said we deny everything. Yeah, the whole world's media was there, the British consulate was there, BBC, this, that, CNN, Al Jazeera, everybody was there from the world, because it was a big, first time British citizens in Yemen, 98. Yeah, and they did all of that, and then after a couple of days they realized, you know what, we're going to get done here, the authorities here. So they banned all the media from coming inside, because it became a circus. Yeah, there was no real trial. The president had already given the order, Ali Abdullah Saleh, that these guys are going down. So it was just a show, kangaroo court every day. Come to the court, go back. Come to the court. 6 months it went on for. You know what I mean? We knew we were going to get sentenced. So then eventually they sentenced us. I got 5 years in prison. The highest was the other guy. Two other guys got 7 years. Me and a couple of other guys, we got 5 years. The reason why they got 7 because they were Arabs, and we got 5 because we were, foreigners. So they were being lenient with us. So then we got transferred to the prison, and then that was a whole other, story while we were in prison. And that's a proper prison. I've been to prison in the UK. The UK prison is not a prison. Yemen was a prison. Yeah, people died. You know what I mean? People get battered. People died in front of my eyes from beatings. So that was a real prison.
Final question. Some people who look at the war or whatever happened in Bosnia, they say that the Muslims in Bosnia, they were fighting, and perhaps the whole war and terror era that we've gone through kind of shapes their opinion and their views on the whole issue of foreign fighters. So they say stuff like, no one asked them to come, the foreign fighters shouldn't have went, they should have just done charity instead, they didn't really help the fight that much. And these are obviously people, maybe some were involved, maybe some were not involved, they're talking from outside perspective. What's your take on that?
In true fashion of how I am and how I speak, the people that say that are pussies and cowards who never had the balls to go there and fight themselves. So what they do is they ridicule those who did go out. You think you're the first person that's mentioned this to me. This has been said to me for so many years. Yeah, oh brother, you can't go without your parents' permission. Oh, unless the ulama give the fatwa and this and that and blah blah blah. And it's la yajuz and it's not permissible, and and they never asked you to come. I've heard this so many times. Yeah. When we were in Bosnia, the Bosnian people would move out of their house and give us their house to live in. The Bosnian people would cook food for us, give us the best food, and just give a minimum to their own families. I witnessed this with my own eyes. Yeah. They would kiss us on the cheeks. They would cry when they saw us. We would be running, when we're doing our training, so we'd be running in formation around the streets, yeah? And they would stand there and they would look at us and there'd be tears in their eyes. Who are you flipping pussycats here in the UK and in the West, they didn't ask you. Were you there? Did you see them? What do you know? You just hear what CNN and BBC told you, yeah, that these are uninvited, blah, blah, blah. Shut your mouth. Go back to your flipping needlework or whatever you do on stamp collecting or butterfly collecting, yeah? Don't talk about these issues. Who are you? Yeah? I'm the person who was there, who saw with his own eyes. I'm telling you, the Mujahideen had a massive impact, and I'll qualify that for you, yeah? When it really momentum picked up and a lot more foreign fighters started coming in, and it gave a massive impetus to the Bosnian army as well, and they were integrated, and a lot of the Bosnians were becoming closer to the deen, because the Mujahideen were not only fighting, they were giving dawah, they were teaching the people about Islam, and the people were getting closer. There were so many Bosnian brothers, ginger beards, blue eyes, big lahia, their wives covering up, wearing hijab and all that. There was a massive revival because of the foreign fighters who brought the deen back into. They loved it. They would come in their droves. They opened up their homes and everything. That gave such a momentum that it got to a stage where Mostar was under the control of the enemy, that the Mujahideen and the Bosnian army together were pushing forward. The next step was going to be, would have been, they were getting closer to Split, which is in Croatia. Split is a port town that is the harbor for the sea. If the Mujahideen had pushed further and got to Split and they could take control of it here, they would have a sea access. Men, arms, money, supplies, no more landlocked. Do you understand what this is? Military, you got to understand what was going on. People don't know this. Yeah, because they just hear some bullshit from CNN or whatever, and these arty-farty, wishy-washy Muslims who just make excuses about this, that, and the other. Yeah, because they didn't have the balls to go and do it themselves. Because in those days you could. It's not like now. Now you can't do that. Yeah, because you're going to get arrested and whatever. In those days you could go and know, bro. For how many years I was openly talking about jihad on the streets of Birmingham? Why didn't I get lifted? Because we weren't seen as extremists or terrorists. We were freedom fighters. So at that time, when you had the chance, you didn't go. So now shut your mouth and don't belittle the ones that made sacrifices, and all those brothers who gave their lives in Shahid, inshallah, yeah, whose names you don't even know, because his name was Abu Flan, Abu Flan, Abu Flan. Yeah, you don't even know his name. He doesn't care. He doesn't want you to know his name. He doesn't want a medal from you. He did it fi sabilillah. So these people, so when that happened, what happened then? You heard about the Dayton Agreement? Yeah, the Americans jumped on board. They sent this Dayton guy, or I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name properly, to do a peace treaty. And that's where the Dayton Agreement came. Okay, you push back to that, you push back to that, you push back to that, yeah? And then what did they tell you? America saved the day. Yeah? That's because we don't write our history, because we don't want to talk about what happened. It was purely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the Mujahideen, putting so much military pressure that they were knocking on the doors of places like Split and other places, taking over territory after territory. The Serbs were being pushed back, the Croats were being pushed back by a handful of guys, yeah, that they realized, nah, because deep down, the West knows who Mujahideen are. They know our history. They've read our books. They know about people like Salahuddin Ayyubi. They know about people like Khalid bin Walid because they teach his tactics in Sandhurst. Yeah, they know more about our fighting prowess than the ulama and the scholars and the Maulvis and the sheikhs and the peers know, because they don't. All they know is about how to do an extension and put new chandeliers and buy a new carpet. The West know about our fighting pedigree, and they know, nah, mate. You can't, you Croats and you Serbs, you can't fight these people. Boom, agreement comes in, war's over. And everybody goes back to sleep again. That's what happened in Bosnia.
So we've reached the end of the episode, and I know it was a little bit longer than others, but I appreciate you for being on this journey and sticking around this long. Next up, we get into another interesting story, and that is the story of Baba Ahmed. See you in the next episode.